Yep. Good morning.
Good morning. Marilena, how are we doing?
Everyone is admitted for now. No one
Okay. Well, I dare say others will join us bit by bit. Magnus has just entered the waiting room, for example. But in the interest of time, let's make a start. Good morning, everyone. A very, very warm welcome, and thank you for making the time to join us today. We have a great gathering from business, academia, think tanks, industry bodies, and national policymakers, including from the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Hungary, Germany, Lithuania, and Croatia. And I'm delighted to say we're joined by many colleagues from the European Parliament and Commission, and of course, by our keynote speaker, the head of Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans' cabinet, Diederik Samson. My name is Philip Smith. I'm the Programme Director of BioAdvantage Europe and its umbrella programme, Europe Delivers, which is led by Zinteo. BioAdvantage Europe is a group of businesses working together to unlock the potential of our bioeconomy for the Green Deal, for our post-COVID recovery, for our biodiversity and climate goals, and the subject of today's gathering for innovation and job creation. All areas, incidentally, that we've published papers on in the case of innovation and job creation, we'll be publishing just next week. Together, this group of organizations aims to engage across the bioeconomy value chain, speaking with one voice about its benefits. Use this voice to support policy decisions with clear and credible evidence, and to catalyze practical action through collaborative demonstration projects. Through the Green Deal and the Recovery Plan, Europe has shown crucial leadership through extreme turbulence in the world. And as we know, COVID has had a major impact on our labour market. Nearly 16 million people across the EU are now jobless, up nearly 2 million compared to 2019, a number which of course is likely to grow as furlough schemes taper. But the crisis has also stimulated action, demonstrating our ability to pivot at pace towards a new paradigm, low carbon, efficient, local, and inclusive. And with the European budget for 2021 to 27 totaling nearly 1.8 trillion euros, we have a huge opportunity to scale cross-industry solutions that work for climate, biodiversity, for the economy, and for people. And as Mr. Samson said to us recently, never has there been more public money, such a sense of urgency on biodiversity and climate, and so much consensus on the way forward. We must not squander that following wind. Today, we'll hear examples from business of where the bioeconomy is supporting innovation and job creation, and discuss some of the challenges and concerns around deploying and scaling these solutions. Mr. Samson, who will leave us at 9, will kick us off with some thoughts on the goals of the Green Deal and the recovery package, and how the bioeconomy can support those ambitions. Then I'm hoping we'll have a really animated discussion between Diederik, Svein Tore Holsetter, the CEO at Yara International, and Henrik Henriksson, CEO at Scania Group and our host. Then Peter Van Acker, CEO of Neste, Christophe Benoit, CEO of Saipol, and Per Müller from the KALUNBORG SYMBIOSE Center will share some of the innovative solutions across the bioeconomy that their organizations are pioneering. Then, before some Q&A, Julian Popov, the former Environment Minister of Bulgaria, will share some thoughts on the growth and just transition opportunities in Eastern Europe. And then finally, Åsa Pettersson, Head of Public Affairs and Sustainability at Scania, will send us off with some thoughts to close ahead of an otherwise busy day, I'm sure. Before I hand to Diederik, may I just please ask that everyone remains on mute, of course, unless you're a speaker. Raise questions for the Q&A session via the chat channel. Leave feedback, ideas, or comments on the feedback and observations chat channel, or of course, feel free to email us so we can follow up later, and ask any problems, any technical problems through the Ask Tech chat channel. Finally, a reminder that this is an open event streaming through the BioAdvantage Europe LinkedIn page, so you'll be able to access the recording later. Okay, Diederik Samson. Diederik trained as a nuclear physicist before serving as CEO to Echte Energie, a Dutch renewable energy trading company. He entered politics formally in 2003 and rose to prominence as both his party's chair and then leader from 2012, and then left domestic politics in 2017. Having worked together in the House of Representatives, he was appointed in 2019 in November as the head of Mr. Timmermans' cabinet. Diederik has kindly offered to share some thoughts on the key goals of the Green Deal and the recovery package, and his thoughts on the opportunities and challenges for the bioeconomy in supporting them. Diederik, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and hello to all of you in this digital environment that we unfortunately getting used to more and more. But help is underway. This morning in the United Kingdom, the vaccination program started, obviously sold by the United Kingdom government as consequences of Brexit, but they were just faster than we are. Let's keep that for another discussion. I was asked to give you an overview of the Green Deal and its consequences also for jobs growth and in the relation to the bioeconomy. And let me reiterate what the Green Deal actually is and why it stands out from normal environmental policies, as we've seen dozens of in the last decades. There's actually three main pillars, and Corona added a fourth. The first three that we already designed before Corona turned our world upside down is, first of all, its ambition, more ambitious than ever. You could say for once politicians didn't settle for the lowest common denominator, but went for the urgency at hand, which is saving our ecosystem for future generations. Hence the climate neutrality in 2050. And obviously that also requires a much more ambitious goal in 2030 that we are discussing in the European Council this week, -55, but also other ambitions to stop the loss of biodiversity, because comparing apples to pears, the loss of biodiversity might be just as big or a bigger threat to future generations and welfare as climate change. But also an ambition to completely stop the further pollution of our soil, our water, and our air. We've polluted enough. High ambitions. The second pillar was the consistency and the coherence. Normally, Europe would shed plans one by one. Basically one on energy, and then sometime later one on transport, and then, oh yeah, something on nature, and then something on agriculture, and then something on water, and more than often they would conflict each other. This time we made one consistent approach, one consistent strategy called the European Green Deal for one goal, which is to save our ecosystem for future generations. And come to think of it, that's actually pretty logical, because there is only one ecosystem, and within that ecosystem, everything is connected with each other too, like we endure now in the pandemic, obviously. And the third pillar, and then we're starting to reach the topic of this morning, jobs and growth, was that it actually wasn't an environmental strategy. It's a growth strategy for Europe, presented as a growth strategy, which received some criticism back in December from environmental movements. Well, understandably, because there is a long-term understanding or misunderstanding that an environmental policy and a growth strategy couldn't be the same. Well, they can. I'm convinced, and I'm happy that we did that in December, because after December our world was changed completely, dramatically, and maybe forever, which is due to Corona and COVID, which entered our lives in March and turned the world upside down. And then something strange happened, because what would normally happen when there is an immediate crisis at hand, an urgency that requires all our attention and political capital and also financial capital, the consequences would normally be that you shelve your long-term ambition. Well, that's for next time, you put it in a drawer, and you will never see it back. We've seen that before in the past. This time is different, and that stems optimistic, because this time the Green Deal, our long-term strategy, our dot on the horizon, our vision for the future, wasn't shelved because of the urgency at hand, the immediate matter that required all our attention, which it did, health-wise, financially-wise, economy-wise. Corona took all our attention, but it also required an answer. And I'm glad to see that we are now in a phase where the Green Deal is actually our answer to Corona in terms of a recovery. So instead of shelving a long-term vision because there's something else at hand, we put it on steroids, and that's the fourth pillar of the Green Deal. Double down on the ambitions, double down on the amount of money that is made available for it, and now we are in a completely different time frame. We have a huge opportunity, but also a huge task at hand, because how to spend all that capital, both financial capital, but also political capital, society capital, in the right direction. That's the question we have to answer today. And to give you that one example, which is, I think, pretty pertinent for this group of people, which is bioeconomy, the bioenergy. If you look at the huge ambition, the first pillar of the Green Deal, the huge ambition obviously has as a consequence that the amount of bioenergy in our system will triple or even more than that. So we need much more of it. And that's disrespective of the amount of bio raw material that we need for our bioeconomy, apart from energy use. So we need a huge amount of extra, which poses all kinds of opportunities for companies like yours. But it also is a big challenge, because look at the second pillar of the Green Deal. It's a coherent, consistent plan. And the increase of bioenergy shouldn't go at the expense of the loss of biodiversity. And to be fair, if we do not pay attention, and sometimes we don't, or often we don't, the increase of the harvesting of bioenergy goes at the expense of biodiversity. All over the world, including in Europe, especially around Europe, but we are responsible because we buy that stuff and we import it. And we need to have a clear strategy. That's the challenge I want to pose to you this morning. We need to have a clear strategy to both increase the production of bioenergy and raw materials, because we need it. We will not be able to have a sustainable economy without it. But at the same time, that increase should not go at the expense, or should actually enhance biodiversity in and around Europe. So that's up to you, or up to us, I should say, honestly, because we are in this together. We have all the policy levers that we want to make available. We have available for you in terms of money, but also in terms of regulation, in terms of incentives, in terms of all kinds of stuff. I sometimes tend to think we throw the whole kitchen sink in policy to this matter, but it's up to you to make it happen, and to take care that let's say, the theoretical pillars of the Green Deal are really made practice. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And as you rightly say, over to us and up to us to achieve those radical ambitions. Thank you, Diederik. Very valuable insights and food for thought, which we'll tease out, I know, in the discussion with Svein Tore and Henrik and yourself. All prominent leaders, and in this case, CEOs of companies, are playing vital roles in the decarbonisation and transformation of their respective sectors of agriculture and transport. As well as his role as CEO of Scania, Henrik is a passionate advocate for sustainability leadership, especially in transport and manufacturing. And he's also an advisor to the Swedish government and part of their UN SDGs Agenda 2030 delegation. And similarly, besides leading Yara International, Svein Tore is a member of the executive committee and chair of the Food and Nature Programme for the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and a commissioner of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission. So I believe that we're in really capable hands. So if Henrik and Svein Tore are now unmuted, I'm going to sort of pose a couple of questions, which I hope at the very least might just instigate a conversation. And then I'm very much hoping to sit back and let it unfold. As I said at the beginning, this conversation is primarily about the role that the bioeconomy can play in innovation and job creation. So let's explore more closely that theme and competitiveness and where we think the bioeconomy fits into this. So Svein Tore, I'm going to start by asking you how you see Europe's potential as a global leader in innovation and high-value job creation, and how you see the bioeconomy already supporting that, and how it could help further.
Thanks, Philip. And let me first say that I really I share Didrik's enthusiasm for what is happening. And now there's a lot of momentum, and the momentum that we didn't see just a year ago, and really focusing on the opportunities and not the constraints. And let me be clear, Europe can be in the driver's seat on this without a doubt. And from my point of view, from BioAdvantage, I see an incredible untapped potential in the field of the farmers. In the EU, agriculture represents approximately 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. So clearly, if you don't get agriculture right, we're not going to be able to deliver on the Paris Agreement. So whether we talk about decarbonizing food or having sustainable biofuel, we need to work throughout the whole value chain, and from input all the way to the consumers. And from the other side, we're working on a number of concrete projects to decarbonize food. An example, just from yesterday, we announced that we have an ambition to change our biggest plant in Europe from using natural gas to renewable energy to produce ammonia and both for fertilizer but also as a fuel for marine. We're working with Veolia to create value from waste, recycling nutrients, and we're also investing heavily in digital farming for precision farming. And I know that the CEO of Cypol is on the call as well. Christophe is here, and we're working together with them and French farmers to reduce the carbon footprint of oilseed rape. So, EU farmers are already among the most efficient in the world, and many of them are facing uncertainties now. So let's change that. Use these initiatives and others to create additional income streams for the farmers, supporting the farmers to get more productive through regenerative farming as one example. I think I'll keep it there for now, Philip.
Thank you. I was really hoping to hear more about regenerative farming, but maybe we'll come back to that in subsequent questions.
Sure.
Thank you. And Henrik, how would you respond? How is the bioeconomy supporting innovation and job creation? What more could we achieve together?
But I think also to comment on Didrik's work, I think it's a fantastic game book and game plan that the Green Deal is providing us to take over and take back sort of the leadership in the world to create growth and innovation in Europe. I think this is our playbook. So I think we salute that work and fully support it, of course. And I think in that, of course, there is room for the bioeconomy to play a very important role. I mean, already today, the bioeconomy in Europe is employing around 18 million people. So I think that there is already a foundation. But I think it's also about diversity of jobs that we can create through the bioeconomy. It's not only high-skilled work, it is low-skilled work. It's sort of through the whole sort of region of Europe. So I think it is an area where we could have a huge impact, not only in selected pockets, but all over Europe. And of course, where I see them belonging to the ecosystem of transport and logistics, Ascana is providing vehicles to that. And we believe that, of course, electrification will come and is coming with big step, but it will require quite big investments in basic infrastructure, not putting up the charge pole, but actually pull out the grid as such in the whole of Europe. Meanwhile, we need something, and if we could use biofuels then to fuel our vehicles instead of fossil fuels, we can not only get an impact that is incremental sort of with new sales. Actually, we can put these fuels into vehicles that are up to 10 years old in our industry, and then we would have a magnificent sort of impact. Two examples of that is The wine producers in France, we're using the residuals then, or residues from the process, producing then bioethanol, and reducing CO2 with up to 90% from a well-to-wheel perspective, with waste actually from the agriculture sector. Similar things are being done by Lantmännen in Sweden, producing ED95 as a fuel and ethanol, bioethanol. And I think another example is the biogas, coming also from waste, but waste from the households and from people's sewage and organic waste. If you take that from 1,000 people, sort of the organic and sewage waste, you basically have enough power through biogas to run a city bus for 1 year. So if we take Stockholm as an example, and with 1.5 million citizens, I think that gives us a fleet of 1,500 buses. That's more than we need if we park all the cars. So I think that there is sort of sources available, but of course we need to scale up the production of this. We need to scale up the rollout of this, and I think that is where we need a little bit more innovation, but we need also to come together. As Didrik was mentioning as well, we need to have a complete picture of how we should do that. And I think that's where the BioAdvantage Europe project comes in. We are companies from different industry sectors that usually do not work together. We come together with policymaker, academia, and then we'll create the value chains that can sort of set the change. And I think two things here is important. One, that we raise the awareness of the bioeconomy. Unfortunately, the stakeholders in bioeconomy is quite diverse, and they don't speak today with one voice. So that is what we're trying to achieve here, to come together and create that awareness of what the bioeconomy can actually do. And the other one is, of course, to create a platform through this cross-sector where we can get not pilots, because I'm sick and tired, I think you are that as well, of pilots. Now real projects that has a resilience to stay for a long time as viable, economical and societal sort of value creators. And that's, I think, we can do with these bioeconomy projects. They should be long lasting. And of course, then taking into consideration, as Didrik was into also, the biodiversity. We have to make sure that there is a tick in all these boxes.
Thanks, Henrik. Didrik, I could see you scribbling there. Did you want to come in immediately on any of Henrik's remarks particularly?
Well, there's actually a few things that make me happy if I listen to all of you. But one of obviously is indeed the concept of regenerative farming or innovation in farming that we desperately need for many reasons. But one of them is actually also going to put in our policies for the next years. We've seen that our land use is both in farming, but also nature and forestry. We always consider that as a stable thing. It wouldn't grow, it wouldn't diminish, it would stay there, and it would keep the carbon as it is. Well, first of all, that is not true. At the moment, our land use is turning into a high emitter, both because of agriculture getting more intensive, but also because of our forests, due to climate change, are degenerating. And we need to turn that upside down, because instead of going back to neutral, where we were and we're now diverting from, we need to go into a situation where our land use is actually a huge carbon absorber, a sink. And agriculture plays an extremely important role in that. So we need innovative farming in order to turn our farmers into carbon sequesters instead of carbon emitters. And the other part is our biofuels, where innovation is key to get us to that, well, third generation, or can I also anticipate the fourth generation biofuels that can be produced without hurting biodiversity, but also with a large CO2 emissions reduction. We shouldn't settle for less than 80% CO2 emission reduction from biofuels. And at the moment, we've too many biofuels on the market that have a lower CO2 emission reduction than an 80%. So we are anticipating updating our renewable energy directive, but also our fuel quality directive, in order to get that CO2 emission number, to get the CO2 emissions down and get the number up to 80, maybe 90% in order to be really sustainable. So those two pillars of innovation that you are at the forefront of are crucial to get our ambitions made into reality.
Here. And I'm just having in the back of my mind Svein Tore's remarks on precision farming and sequestration as well, and the clear need to recognise the depleting impacts of agriculture if not managed with the balance, Diederik, that you spoke to a little earlier. Before I think Svein Tore, you want to come in. I want to just capture a remark, Henrik, you made around low skilled versus high skilled jobs. What a remarkable economic opportunity it is, where people are concerned about the K-shaped recovery, a recovery marked by inequality post-COVID. If this economy, this sector can support both low-skilled and high-skilled jobs, what an impact that would have. Svein Tore, I think you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on both what Henrik said. I really like what you're saying. Let's stop talking about pilots and do things at scale. I think that's key. But and also the comments from Diederik are very welcome when it comes to agriculture, farming, and the potential in that, both with regards to biodiversity, but also as carbon sinks. And one of the biggest challenges that we have in agriculture at the moment is that farmers today are only paid for the crop, the size of the crop, and that's it. How can we put in place incentives that reward farmers for how efficient do they run the farm? How do they use the farm to capture CO2, for example, and the quality of the food and how nutritious it is, and so on. And here we need some cooperation between the private and public to have the structures in place. And I'll be very concrete on that. Even identifying a farm field is something that is not standardized today. And we embarked on that journey in Yara together with IBM earlier this year to create an open data exchange that we can measure this, because imagine what is happening now when all the input providers and all the retailers and everyone is trying to measure emissions. So what's happening to the farmers? That's going to be an incredible burden unless we create some standards. Yeah. And I'm willing to take that open data exchange and everything that we've done and outside the Yara as a foundation, nonprofit or whatever, in order to create a platform that we can build this on top on. And if we can do that together, this is possible to do at scale quickly. We're already scaling up very fast within Yara, but I see that in order to get full traction on this, we need to open up and move it away so that there's no skepticism that we'll use this for a competitive advantage. So let's continue talking about that, how we can do that together and quickly, and through that, be able to create jobs.
That's marvelous. I'm determined, if we can, just to sneak one final question in for Diederik before we lose him at 9. But Henrik, I think you wanted to come in yourself.
Yeah, now I will make sure that we'll let the final word come in for Diederik. But just one short comment, and I think that is that there is a lot of course, policy changes that are coming in now that will affect the bioeconomy. And I'm just raising my hand to say that, I mean, let's not make sure that we kill all the entrepreneurship and the innovation that is in this sector, but by adding too big of magnifying glass on this industry. I'm happy when I hear 80% CO2 emission reduction as maybe like a borderline, but I would also be happy if that same rules applied for fossil fuels. And sometimes I get a feeling that fossil fuels we don't care about anymore. But when it comes to bioeconomy, we have this long list of demands that we need to fulfill. So I think that's just a humble request that we look at this a little bit holistic, of course, but also that we don't kill it with too many initiatives. Don't kill a good solution because it's not great yet.
Diederik, have we got time just for me to throw a question at you before you jump out?
Please go.
Thank you. It's about standards, which you referred to earlier on, and I think it's a really important nettle to grasp. So, we have a very, very well-earned reputation in Europe for setting and maintaining high standards, and especially in matters of climate and biodiversity. and environmental protection, which you've just mentioned a little earlier. So as we accelerate our response to the climate crisis in this decade of action, how do we remain competitive while still achieving those standards? It's really like to start with you.
Yeah, also because adapting a new attitude to our high standards, which you could call more assertiveness or vigilance towards the rest of the world. We are used to setting higher standards than the rest of the world, and our companies are used to it. They're more innovative, more creative than others, and they've always managed to live on that higher playing field than the rest of the world, and actually have profited from it. As has the rest of Europe. So many thanks for that. But obviously there is so much you can do into this. So if we ramp up our playing field to even higher levels of environmental, social, ethical standards, yes, we need to adapt a more assertive attitude to the rest of the world. Hence the carbon border adjustment mechanism, where we say to outside products, you're welcome in Europe, but you have to pay a fee if your carbon footprint is higher than ours. But also on other we are just in the midst or in the finalizing hours of a new strategy on batteries, which is also very important for transport infrastructure. And we're setting new standards for that batteries, but we're also going to apply those standards to the rest of the world wanting to export to Europe in a more vigilant way than we used to do. We have settled too often. We have settled for, okay, we can't do this in WTO context, so let the goods flow in and have our companies struggle to make ends meet and compete with those products that are obviously from a lower standard. So we are going to adopt a more assertive attitude. And some people will say because we want to protect our companies. I would say because we want to protect our environmental integrity. If we have our standards, we shouldn't export the pollution to the rest of the world. So it's just as much a matter of environmental integrity as it is for competitiveness for our own companies. And a final remark, I feel with Hendrik, I've worked in this field for 25 years, and I always find it odd that we have those high standards and expectations from environmental things like biofuels, and we forget about the real dirty stuff, which is oil. But rest assured, we're going to get rid of oil soon, and that's why we anticipate that new world of renewable fuels in which we have those high standards for all of us. Thank you very much.
That's a super response.
Seminar.
The very best of luck for the rest of the week. Thank you for joining us, Diederik. Enjoy the rest of your day as well. Thank you. So Henrik, I'm going to come back to you, if I might. I think the message of vigilance and assertiveness is a good one if it puts us on the front foot internationally. But from where you stand as at the helm of a very distinctly global business, how does this feel to you? Is there competitive advantage to be won and leveraged by being an exemplar in the climate response?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I am a true believer that sustainability and profitability goes hand in hand. I mean, and if you do not transform your company to become truly sustainable, you will soon not be relevant because your products and services will be outdated and you will not be an attractive employer, and no one would like to invest in you either. So for me, I think this is just a great opportunity that a tougher sort of environment and a tougher sort of pressure on ourselves, like in Europe, will create. I agree with Diederik there, that we create stronger European companies and it will create world leaders. So the sooner we're on this journey, the better. And I think that goes the same for the bioeconomy as well. I mean, if we are investing into this economy, creating these jobs and sort of with a broad scale, we will also create a little bit of a better independence as well. Independence that not that we should shy away from trade or anything, but I mean that we build up a little bit of resilience in our own sort of region as well. I think that should not be neglected either.
Yeah.
So there is a higher potential. So, but I have to come back also then and just throw back to you, Philip, also that I like this comment about the battery alliance. I think maybe what we should think of is actually creating a bioeconomy alliance and have sort of a similar sort of focus. I think that because there is a lot of good initiatives, but it's not coming together under one umbrella. And I think that's what we can achieve in this BioAdvantage Europe project. So
that's very much the ambition, as you say. Svein Tore, I can hear Peter clearing his voice, and we need to bring in some other voices. But I'd love to give the last word to you on standards and the competitive advantage of standards.
Yeah, well, I think it's you know, through developing standards, we can start to build business models that respond to those. And as I said initially, within the farming community in Europe, it's already among the most efficient in the world, but still it has a cost to the environment, to climate, and to health, and so on. And from our point of view, by changing our business model, and we had a session on that where we announced our updated strategy from Yara yesterday. We see business opportunities and not looking, traditionally on just increasing the crops of the farmers, but also looking at sustainability, the hidden cost of the food system. To put it in a perspective, that according to the Food and Land Use Coalition, the total value creation in the food system in the world today is $10 trillion, which is a huge number, of course. But the hidden cost of the food system is $12 trillion. So it's a net negative $2 trillion. And by starting to adapt our business model to address the negatives, we create new business opportunities. So it's back to what Henrik said, constantly evolving the business model to respond. And here I think we have an advantage being in Europe because it's already quite advanced. Thanks.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And you're kindly going to stay with us. So when we get to the Q&A later, I'm sure there'll be some questions which the floor will want to table. Before I come to Peter, I'm going to pass to Christoph. As you heard me saying a little earlier, we have a variety of other leaders of their respective organizations, pioneers in this space. And first we have Christophe Benoit. Christophe started his career in Cargill in distribution and marketing for sunflower and rapeseed, and then as a sugar trader, and finally as director, Svein Tore, you'll be delighted to hear, of the fertilizer business. Christophe then joined the fertilizer division of Total Group as director of trading, commerce and marketing, becoming head of the procurement and trading department. He was then appointed as general manager at Borealis France, following the business's acquisition by Borealis Group, and then joined Avril Group in early 2017 as chief commercial and trading officer for Saipol, who Svein Tore referred to a little earlier. Christophe, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. So no, we probably Avril and Saipol are not as famous as Scania and Yara would be, and so our company was founded in the early 80s with an objective to make France self-sufficient in vegetable proteins. And if you can switch on the second, yes, the first challenge we have to face all together, and you will see the connection with durability and the biodiversity issues, is the one of the protein self-sufficiency of Europe. And the crops we are crushing in France, we are crushing 4 million tons of rapeseed and sunflower seeds, are composed of 60% of meal, and this meal is a high protein content ingredient for animal nutrition. And if you look at this graph, you realize that Europe is a very high deficit in this protein, and that to compensate that deficit, we have to import massive amounts of soybean from across the world. Most of it is GMO, and some of it comes from deforestation. So we know that the challenge, for example, in Brazil, and the deforestation taking place today, is basically focused on producing more and more soybean, and this soybean ends up as a feed for the European farm. So one of the very interesting point I noted in the discussion with Mr. Sampson is that he said literally everything is connected, and so indeed everything is connected. And when we crush again rapeseed or sunflower seeds in Europe, we also contribute to this self-sufficiency in the protein complex. Maybe on the second slide, just also was raised the capacity for soils in Europe, but in the world, to sequestrate carbon from the atmosphere. And I fully support the point that agriculture should not be treated only as an emission point from a carbon perspective, but also as a way to sequestrate and stock carbon in soil. And the IPCC is clearly stating that would every soil increase its carbon storage by 4 per 1,000 every year, we would absorb in the world soils the quantity of carbon emissions at the world level. So it's a very serious leverage to reduce the climate change, and we have been engaging in that project, which is not a pilot. Again, it is actually running, which we call OleOZE. ZE stands for zero emission, as you could guess, is an incentive to farmers to adopt the proper practices to reduce their carbon footprint and increase the carbon storage in agricultural soils. And that goes with a bonus. Well, that goes with an actual bonus that the farmer gets paid in order to stimulate the change in practices. If you want to switch on the second slide concerning OleOZE, so there are 3 leverages to reduce carbon emission in agriculture. The first of them is minimum tillage. It will reduce carbon emission in the atmosphere, but it also will maintain the carbon into the soil and improve also the biodiversity by stimulating a much more living soil as a better environment for growing crops onto it. Intercropping is a very interesting way to never leave the soil without a coverage. And one of the initiatives we are and one of the innovations we are developing at the moment is also to develop those harvestable intercrops. So in other words, instead of just growing something in between two major crops, there are a few species, I'm thinking about Camelina, Carinata, that can be harvested with a very, very interesting carbon footprint and turned into biofuels. Maybe we come back to that just after. And then fertilization. So be it organic to store more carbon in soils, but Svein mentioned it at Tiara, we are collaborating, of course, in order to reduce the carbon emission whenever fertilizing with nitrogen chemical fertilizers. And obviously, green ammonia is definitely a very, very interesting leverage to reduce the carbon footprint of the crops we are crushing. And all that goes into the third, I would say, leverage for of what we're doing to support, I mean, the effort of climate change resolution. We mentioned protein, we mentioned soil as a carbon sequestration, and the third one is our contribution to transportation. And that's our last slide. Eventually as we have launched now 2 years ago, OleoZE. It's a B100 solution supported by the major trucks company, and probably the first one supporting this initiative was the Scania. So I'm really happy that Henrik is around this table, because B100 has really been seen by Scania also as a very important leverage to improve the carbon footprint. And if we put all that together, and also taking into account that we are, I would say, multi-certified. I mean, it's no greenwashing here. I mean, we have a triple certification by DUPS, by ISCC and RSB, proving that from well, so from the farm field to wheel, we have 60% saving in carbon emission in comparison to the fossil equivalent. So, moving into those initiatives, again, not as pilot, but as real businesses, because when it comes to OleOZE or when it comes to OleoZE, this is becoming really a pillar of our development in France after the crisis we have been crossing lately, facing major imports of soybean and palm oil, biodiesel imported in Europe, competing with our local products. So the challenge is indeed in everything we have already been discussed, and we are on the forefront of all these challenges.
Thank you very much indeed, Christophe, for that sprint. I'm conscious of the pressure we put you under when we give you so little time, and it was a very good articulation. Thank you. Straight from you to Peter Van Acker. Peter has a background in polymers and chemicals from before joining Neste, which he did in 2018. Peter has an extensive career with various CEO and leadership positions in companies such as Bayer, Treofan, and the CAB Group, working in Belgium, Germany, Japan, China, Brazil, and the US, so a distinctly international gentleman. Peter is also chair of the advisory board of the European Institute for Industrial Leadership. Peter, very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Over to you now.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Philip. And maybe before I start, there's a couple of things, that resonate very well. And Henrik said, for example, that as a bioeconomy, we need to talk with one voice. I truly believe in that we have too many different messages coming out, and we should really reflect upon that. The other thing, that Henrik also said was the impression that he has, and actually is also an impression that I have, that we have at the company Neste, is that there is a magnifying glass on biofuels, but not as much, if we are talking about the oil-based products. So let's take the solutions that we have available today and not overdo it, because otherwise we may kill the innovation in this very important industry. So thanks for inviting me today. The bioeconomy is an important topic for us at Neste. We are a company which creates solutions for combating the climate change and accelerating a shift to a circular economy. We refine waste, residues, and innovative raw materials into renewable fuels and sustainable feedstocks for plastics and chemicals. And for example, our renewable diesel results in up to 90% less greenhouse gas emissions over the fuel's life cycle when compared to fossil diesel. And here I remember that Mr. Samsung Diderik was talking about 80% at least in his view. So that would meet the requirements. It is also fully compatible with all diesel engines and distribution infrastructure. On top of the blending volumes, this 100% renewable diesel is already being sold in almost 500 fuel stations and in several EU member states, for example, in the Netherlands, as well as in the Nordic and Baltic countries. We also produce sustainable aviation fuel, which provides an immediate solution for reducing the direct carbon emissions of flying. And it's already available and also in commercial scale by over 10 airlines globally. We currently have an annual capacity of only 100,000 tons of sustainable aviation fuel, but with our big investment that we currently are undertaking in Singapore, and with possible additional investments into the Rotterdam refinery, we will have the capacity to produce some 1.5 million tons of sustainable aviation fuel, latest by the end of 2023. These are just a couple of examples. Both are fully compliant with the RED II regulation, and innovative solutions come across the bioeconomy offer a great potential for reducing emissions. For example, in road transportation, the Renewable Energy Progress Report by the European Commission has found out that according to information reported by member states, almost half of the total emissions savings from the use of renewables in transportation comes from biofuels already today. The key message here is that there is already available sustainable alternatives for the transportation and aviation industries, and these are innovations made in Europe, high-value jobs employing European people and strengthening the continent's competitive advantage in the low-carbon economy. What is required is regulation, which encourages investments into innovation as well as capacity expansion. Regulation should support all the good solutions to reduce emissions so that consumers and customers could choose the right alternative for their needs. And for example, in road transportation, if we are to fully utilize the contribution from biofuels, the EU vehicle CO2 regulations should be supplemented with a more holistic well-to-wheel approach. One step forward would be to include a voluntary crediting system for vehicle manufacturers to give more flexibility and cost efficiency in their efforts to reach the CO2 targets for 2030. If we move to the next slide. Now, it's not enough that we reduce emissions on road and skies. We need to reduce emissions in all the sectors and reduce the carbon footprint of different end products. Neste, for example, is also developing more sustainable solutions for the polymers and chemicals industry with a focus on two areas. The first area is circularity. So together with several plastics value chain partners, we're developing technologies and capacity to chemically recycle plastic waste. And our aim is to process over 1 million tons of waste plastic annually from 2030 onwards. The other keyword is renewable. That is producing renewable feedstock to replace virgin fossil feedstock in the production of a variety of plastics and chemicals. And together with our partners, we did the first ever commercial scale production of 100% bio-based plastics from renewable and circular materials already in 2019. This was the first time on the world and the planet, and have since announced more partnerships. So it is also feasible. I've spent 30 years in the polymers and chemicals industry, as Philip said, and I've never seen the excitement or, on the other hand, the pressure also to make this industry also more sustainable. The change comes from the customer side, the consumer side, from big brands making clearly articulated sustainability commitments, and also from regulation and legislators. The EU legislation should take a holistic approach to the circular economy. Recycled and renewable materials are key components to reduce the dependence on virgin fossil resources and meet the ambitious EU targets, and including regulatory drivers in packaging and sustainable product policy and economic drivers, such as, for example, the just recently announced introduction of the EU plastic tax. The bioeconomy and renewable carbons have an enormous role to play in the plastics and chemicals industry. There is great, often unrecognized potential to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the same way that biofuels contribute to decarbonizing the transportation sector. There is sufficient biomass available to support the large-scale rollout of biofuels and biomaterials. And for example, we at Neste expect that the global waste and residue availability will grow to over 35 million tons by 2030. In the previous quarter, the share of waste and residues was already 86% of our total renewable raw material inputs. And as our feedstock strategy is focused on waste and residues growth and development of new feedstock sources, we target to grow this to 100% at the latest by 2025. And I can tell you it will definitely earlier than at the latest of 2025. But the thing is that there is no silver bullet. Every technology, process, business, and society needs to run on something. And at the same time, we will need all technology solutions to tackle the climate crisis. So legislation can encourage companies like Neste to innovate and maximize value from existing resources. This is essential for accelerating the shift towards a circular bioeconomy in Europe and for the continent's economic growth and recovery. The biofuels industry, for example, was the third largest renewable energy job creator already in 2018, with considerable potential for further growth also today. And all of that is, of course, not possible without cooperation. Fighting major challenges calls for innovation, commitment, and partnerships. And that is what I call the power of collaboration. So thanks for your attention, and back to you, Philip.
Peter, thank you. And your segue to Per around cooperation is absolutely perfect. So thank you sincerely. Without further ado, I'm going to hand to Per and welcome him. Per is going to share a little bit about the work of the KALUNBORG Symbiosis Center in Denmark, including how it came about, some of the lessons that have been learnt, and the potential to transfer and scale this model to other regions. Per is an expert in the field of industrial symbiosis, circular economy, which Peter also touched on, and the blue biomass, i.e. the creation of biomass from seaweed. And Per, without further ado, looking forward enormously to hearing a little bit more about the KALUNBORG Symbiosis Center's work.
And thank you, Philip. And I will disappoint you because I will only have the opportunity to present so and so much within the 7 minutes. But anyway, thank you for having me, and I will try to push the right button here. But yes, exactly, Peter, what you said about partnership and the circular bioeconomy, it's so crucial for us to actually move forward within whatever field we actually prioritize alone or together. We need to do this thinking about an ecosystem approach. So we really need to have this organism that we're living in and on to function ideally. And that is only if every organ and every metabolism or every enzyme is actually working in concert. And that's what this is all about. The KALUNBORG Symbiosis is an old partnership that grew organically over time and has developed to something that is really resilient and will be for many decades to come, I hope. But it's really based on the need of exploring the resources in the best possible way to create solid but smart business models, to do it sustainable, to create socio-economic benefits, to create value for the businesses, but also to support the innovation level, the development of businesses as we go along, as the world is changing. Demand is there, but we need to create jobs also. We need to support our own local society. If that is, then there's resources and access power to actually develop in the direction that we need to develop to actually make this sustainable. So this is a sustainable partnership in this triple helix way. So also looking into the environment. So this is really a partnership that is orchestrated and facilitated by a local Symbiosis center where I'm in as a developer. We make them meet 4 times a year, now 6. They want more meetings now, but really it's the CEOs meeting, discussing the current needs, the challenges, and where there's some synergies and common challenges where we can actually assist each other as kind of an organism to make things work and to actually profit from it in multiple ways. Just say that this is not a cluster, and it's really it's cross-sectoral collaboration. This network. With the public entities, also the utilities and the municipality also being some of the members and also some of the main drivers in this, because we need to interfere with the common practice in industry. Of course, they need to produce, but then we need to interfere and take them along on the journey into innovation and how to develop and become more smart in our production, so be more sustainable, because sustainability is the way we're going to survive in this business, right? So we need to rethink, and we need to make it a new natural, a new normal in a way. So circular and green industrial symbiosis, where waste from one company becomes the value of another, or a partnership. It has to be the new normal, and it is. We are not the only one in KALUNBORG doing this. It's happening all over. We just need to hook up and talk more together and actually expand and think of new ways of doing partnerships and new partnership models. And that's really going to support all the things that you said early on, and you are already representing good partnerships models and good businesses. So this is just our case, and I'm not going to go into it in detail, just say that all energy produced in KALUNBORG right now, not all consumed, but all energy produced there is now sustainable. Gone from coal to biomass, we have wind turbines, we have solar panels, we have biogas, and we have biogas to biomethane. What we have realized is these 20 plus partnership models. So it's really green business models where we share not only a waste stream as a resource into new production, but it's also a collaboration on innovation, knowledge, capacity building, data sharing, building trust, and so on. And this makes this local network that is growing into a more regional, national network robust, resilient, and environmental friendly also. It's really a strong brand, but it's really creating robustness, this resilience in their production, and this strong network where you can actually share also your challenges. So a lot of good business models creating value at multiple levels. And if I can have the last slide, please. This leads into actually value created, because the question has been, what are we creating? And only through trust you can actually get access to the data inside the companies, so that it takes time. But just annually, between these few companies, we have quite a saving on CO2, 0.6 million a year, $16.5 million in socioeconomics, and it's $28 million in savings for the companies, just in pure, I mean, business savings. Then you have all the innovation level, all the benefits in job creation, education linked to it, and the branding. And what I should say, this is really a value proposition attracting new businesses. So Christian Hansen, #1, I believe last year, and #2 this year, as the most sustainable businesses, has actually decided to move to KALUNBORG to join Ørsted, who's I think currently #1. So this is also a value creation proposition to work this way and to actually support each other in actually developing businesses and being more sustainable. So it's really the way forward, I believe, and when we are moving that way. But what we're offering is really a knowledge-based input to practice. So we need to put this into practice. So I fully support, of course, test and demonstration, piloting, fine, but let's put this into existing industrial sites where they already have a partnership and have strong trust, and help us to actually commercialize and have this out in production, and put the risk in a partnership model instead of doing it alone. I think that's all the time I had for now. So thank you.
That's fabulous, and I loved. It was a pity we've just lost that last slide, because the capturing dissemination of proof points of that sort, of that magnitude, is so important to getting people on this journey. And I particularly liked your remarks about the need to interfere and disrupt. And it sort of strikes me that we need both courage and an open mind to do those two things, to interfere and disrupt for the greater good. Your focus on SYMBIOSE is, again, a really super segue to our next speaker, Julian Popov. Julian, I'm sure, needs little introduction from me at the very least. Julian is a fellow of the European Climate Foundation, chairman of the Building Performance Institute of Europe, and a former Minister of the Environment for Bulgaria. He is the founding Vice Chancellor and current board member of the New Bulgarian University, and was voted as one of the 40 most influential voices on European energy policies by Euractiv. He's widely published with articles on European and energy policy in the Financial Times, The Independent, Al Jazeera, Huffington Post, Euractiv, and many, many others besides. Julian, really, really keen to hear some thoughts from you, and the segue, clumsy as it may have been, was of course some of the conversations that we've had in the past around low carbon innovation clusters. But you're here particularly to talk with us and share some thoughts around the opportunities for just transition and job creation through the bioeconomy in Eastern Europe. Julian.
Thank you very much for this opportunity also to speak for Eastern Europe. As you know, in Eastern Europe we are generally quiet and obstructive. Sometimes we're loud and obstructive, and the opportunity to engage with at this level with this issues is really very, very good and attractive. I mean, Eastern Europe, both in and out of the European Union, offers huge potential for reaching the goals of the European Green Deal, and that is not always recognized. But what is more interesting, the European Green Deal is also a huge and once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for narrowing or even in some cases closing the gap between East and West. This is a gap that still exists. And if we look at the proposition of the Green Deal, it shows us that it can really transform the industry, the transport, agriculture, and the building stock of Eastern Europe. And now we have we've been dreaming and talking about Marshall Plan all the time, and now we have a Marshall Plan, and we have to grab this opportunity. I will give a couple of examples to be more specific. Now, through the just transition mechanism in the European Union, there are the territorial plans for the regions that are most affected by the energy transition, and these are mostly co-regions, and co-regions are seen as the victims of the transition. However, they can become drivers of the transition. Co-regions in Europe have 7,500 square kilometers land, and they're ailing. And instead of we thinking about compensating somehow people who lose their jobs, we should think about how to reinvent the co-regions and these big industrial regions, and link that with development of new type of economy, which is, I'm thinking like a kind of vertically integrated economy in which we recognize the regeneration quality of these regions, the carbon retention, but also food production, protein production. I was very happy to hear specific focus on protein earlier. But also the link between the food production and bioenergy and biofuels in the first and second and third generation, and Diederik mentioned the fourth generation even, and the biomass. Biomass in Eastern Europe is a very interesting thing. It's burnt in the most irresponsible way. Eastern Europe achieve its carbon targets mostly by burning in very inefficient way biomass, and this is another huge opportunity. So the production of biogas and power and waste, and the co-regions with their huge land could become exactly that kind of areas where we can develop this new economy, and that could be linked with the new type of industrial zones which are looking at zero carbon future. I mean, we can see that now already happening. For instance, in Bulgaria, the Plovdiv Economic Zone, which announced its zero carbon strategy for 2050 as an economic zone, and looking very much for examples in places like KALUNBORG, SYMBIOSE. But there are also other companies and developments in Eastern Europe. I mean, the Liberty Steel group that is developing 2030 zero carbon economic zone based on steel production in Romania, or a company in biofuel and bioenergy company in Bulgaria, Alma Guest, which reaches. We were hearing about over 80% carbon savings. It achieves more than 90% carbon savings through carbon capture and utilization and use of biomass and sustainable ways. So there are this appearance here and there in Eastern Europe, but what we really need is probably to focus on these areas like the co-regions, which offer, I don't know, in Bulgaria 250 square kilometers, in Romania 700, in Poland there are 1,400 square kilometers of land that will be now abandoned, and this is the land with fantastic infrastructure, but also with very highly qualified workforce. So when we talk about pilot projects plus projects that will really develop a new type of bioeconomy and industry, I would very much urge this fantastic group to look at these areas for development and transformation.
Julian, thank you. And you've told us some of us have had the privilege of listening to this story before, and there are a number of us on this call who are already converts to this idea, and I'm hoping very much to be able to tell more about it in the very near future and how we might be able to engage with it. I'm going to turn now to a period of question and answer. We've got around 15 minutes or so left. I want to leave the last word to OleOZE, as I said at the beginning, but some questions are coming in, and there's a question here that I really like, and I'm going to put Peter on the spot in the initial term, and maybe Henrik as well, because the question's around collaboration across the bioeconomy. This is a message that Henrik gave us a short while ago, and I'm going to read the question verbatim. I'm afraid I don't know where it's come from, but if I find that out shortly, I'll attribute it. But the question is this: what are the next collaborations and partnerships for the industry, that the industry needs to create the next waves of innovation in the bioeconomy, increasing precision farming, scaling sustainable biofuels, growing bio-based materials, and what needs to happen to make them a reality? And the reason that I like that question is because it considers the sector as a whole, not a series of segments, but as a whole sector. And I'm really taken by that question. So Peter, I'm going to put it to you first, and then come to Henrik in a second.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, Philip. I mean, I'm going to try at least, to answer that question, because it's a very holistic question. And of course, different industries have different value chains. But I do believe, if you talk about it holistically, that on one hand side, there need to be a very good cooperation, on one hand side, between innovation centers. These can be universities, they can be development centers. Then, of course, the different companies along the value chain. That can be, of course, a fuel company or a renewable hydrocarbon company. But then, of course, you also need to have the steam cracker companies. You need to have the polymers producers. You need to have the end consumer as well as the brand owner to create, that holistic pull in the market. But very important, it needs to be also together with the regulators. Because these changes that we are talking about, if you want to have exponential growth in those changes, then it needs to go hand in hand. And here I go back a little bit to the discussion that we had already this morning. We need to make sure that we remain realistic in what do we want to achieve. And of course, we want to have 0% by 2050. But if we don't take what is available, we're not going to achieve, 0% by 2050 either. So let's not overdo it, but give the time in that holistic cooperation to develop the new solutions that today are not economically feasible and scalable yet. It's great to talk about the third generation, fourth generation, and fifth generation, but let's take, the second generation and work together with innovation support from the authorities so that we can actually have the clarity and that it makes sense also to develop the third and fourth generation.
Thank you. And I'm taken also as you speak about, of course, the working example that Per has shared with us around KALUNBORG. So Henrik, when we think in my mind about the success of the bioeconomy and how it is so dependent on circularity, and thus the more we consider the bioeconomy as a community rather than as a set of segments, and I liked, Peter, your remark about the value chains, the independent value chains of each. How, Henrik, can we create better knowledge sharing in order to build an economy for the bio industries and not simply a set of independent sectors?
Yeah, but what I would like to see is that we put ourselves a target that already next year, 2021, just to make sure that it's a solution of here and now. And just like Peter is saying also that we cannot talk about some potential silver bullet that is coming tomorrow. We need to fix the problem here and now. So set up a chain of change that sort of goes through a different number of industry sectors where all the participants that are here today on the call can contribute. And that would basically be to start with Julian and sort of the land in Bulgaria or the land in Poland that maybe is left over from the coal industry or that is contaminated from certain industries. We start growing sort of crop. We start collecting waste. I'm happy to hear what Peter said before about sort of 86% coming from sort of different kinds of waste, we start to create our own feed crop, either grow it or we collect it as waste. And then we create, with the players that are online today, sustainably produced biofuels that we can use to fuel and transport, which is one of the contributors, 20% of the CO2 emissions in Europe. And then we find a transport operator, which I'm sure we can find online here as well, and then someone who would like to buy the transport. If no one else, I can buy it to feed my factories and to distribute my trucks and buses in Europe. So then we create a complete chain and a circular chain that we sort of can use then to go to Brussels and to show to Diederik and say, okay, this is how it works. And we don't have to wait for something new to happen. We just need to create it. But there is a number of hurdles here, one or two of them, where we need a policy ask. And then I think if we come as a number of different industries together and make that request, we will be more credible than if we come on our own. And I think that would create that one voice of the bioeconomy that we need so desperately. So that's what I would like to say, that we need to go from talks to action and do it already next year. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I think there's something in this around a different spirit in the conversations with policymakers, and building on your remark, Henrik, not simply giving them policy asks, but committing, as you have so demonstrably, to being part of that chain of change. Svein Tore, since the question also spoke a little bit about precision farming, let me come back to you, and following on from Henrik's remarks about the opportunities that we know sit beyond Central and into Eastern Europe as well. How do we create better knowledge sharing? How do we create better collaboration across this remarkable industry?
Well, I think it's key to demonstrate leadership across the whole value chain, and I'd like to use the opportunity to give credit to Henrik on this, and what you're really showing the way. I followed Henrik in Scania for many years because I believe it's possibly the most productive and efficient company in the world, and now to see you also taking the leadership on understanding the impact of your products and trucks as they're being used as well, and the fact that you have an opinion on what happens at farm level, that's real leadership. And I think by creating that transparency and the fact that we're discussing this, to how do we increase the productivity, how do we make sure that the farmers get paid, what we heard from Samsung as well. We just need to get the data out there and have this as a science-based approach, but also with urgency, not waiting for years to get the perfect solution, but to get something that works in 2021 or before, because a lot of this is already available. It's about putting it in context and understanding the total impact of what we're doing, and then we can make huge advances.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with this just maybe for one moment longer and bring Per in. You spoke there, Svein Tore, about knowledge sharing and how we can share data, aggregate and share data. Per, putting you on the spot terribly, it'd be interesting to hear any lessons that you have learned in KALUNBORG about data aggregation and knowledge sharing.
Yeah, well, we've had quite a lot of experience, and both like the nice stuff and the bad stuff and the challenging stuff. But it's like from our side, in order to actually facilitate this process and actually support and push towards these partnership models, business models, and also convert them into green business models. Of course, we need to know what is happening. We need to understand the needs and how the future looks tomorrow, and try to look into the near future, right? And work with the businesses to facilitate this. And of course, this is based on trust. So that's the way we can get at the data. And we need to have this approach of being with a respectful, but also a pushing approach towards the businesses, and trying to understand where we can move and try to get information, latest knowledge from knowledge institutions to actually link those innovative to existing technologies into operation in the businesses to actually create these on-ground production sites. So it's really based on trust, but it's also based on being a bit persistent and being eager to actually wanting to make this change and create this buzz around it Like today, we are here. I mean, if we met every 1 month, half an hour, I mean, things would happen. I'm pretty sure it will. But we go back to business as usual. We need to run our factories, or we want to run our boards, or whatever we are involved in. But I mean, we need to actually hang on to this and commit this. And then I like the fact that, yeah, of course we have leaders, but we need the leadership. Leaders that take action, that are dedicated, and actually, yeah, are proud and actually contributing to this change, because it is not only about feeling good, it is actually smart, good business, and it's the way forward to actually keep producing. We need to do this in a smart way. So let's move ahead, but we need to open up, be trustworthy, and we need to share. That's the only way. So I mean, to make this happen and to do these partnerships, we need to share information. We need to be vulnerable, bold enough to actually share what is the challenge of my business, to actually understand what is the common challenge, right? And so where can we actually then take action? But it's really about communication and people to make it happen, right?
It's funny, as you've been speaking, a question's just come in, and the spirit of your remark there, Per, you know, leaders that lead, I feel very much, Henrik, is along the lines of your remark about, you know, I'm sick and tired of pilots. You know, we need to start to sort of get on the front foot and walk the talk. But the question that's come in is this: many have spoken today about the need to raise awareness of what the bioeconomy does. How can business tell this story more clearly? And the reason I'm taken by this question is because also John Bell, who many of you will know, has commented, as some of you will have seen, says, very encouraged to hear this thought leadership from the CEO level, useful perhaps to draw their attention to where many of the actions are already underway, and their engagement with other CEOs now will be very effective. And I think, again, the spirit of that is, how do we make people understand what's going on and what could be going on if we came together and behaved, as Henrik has said a moment or two ago, as a you know, an economy-wide body. Per, do you want to just take that? It looks like you're keen to come in, and then
just a small note, because what we have faced is the urgent need to actually communicate what we already have achieved and what we are about to achieve. We need to tell those stories in a clear, understandable way that is not only aiming at the businesses, but also at a normal consumer and the politicians and so on, university people. So it has to be, it's really critical that we have people to help us with this communication, and that companies allow us to actually tell these stories about the real life solutions. We need to put practice into operation. We need to share these best practices. And if we don't tell the stories, like, you can write a book, a really good book, but if there's nobody buying it or reading it, it doesn't exist. I mean, we need to share our stories. We need to share our books. It could be small chapters, but it could also be just a preface, just pitching into, but we really like these practical, where we have realized, and there's so many out there, but we just forget to, because once it's commercialized, we just run, and then we try to hide it as a business, right? But it will grow only if you share it. It will only become reality if it's told, right?
I really like that. So going back to telling stories, Per, and go straight to Henrik, who has just published a book, by the way. How can business tell this story more clearly? And when Henrik's finished, Julian, I'd love to come to you as an erstwhile policymaker. How do you want to receive a story in a way that will enable you to act and get on the front foot? Henrik.
Okay, here we go. But I agree with that. I think that there is so many good initiatives and so many good examples that we can learn from, and that we need to voice, and that we need to make sure that that people listen to. But I also believe in the power of this, that you're working together in unexpected alliances that I think we can create around by the bioeconomy, that we create a different kind of traction and also a broader audience. Because at the end, I think it is true, like Per is saying, we need to get the society to listen, and on all the stakeholders in society, which includes then policymakers. So I think that there is this sort of accelerator or exponential sort of opportunity if we work across sector around the bioeconomy. Then I think we'll get better reach. But we should reuse, and I think, like John is saying in his comment here as well, we should reuse all the knowledge that is there already, and make sure that we tell each other's story, not only our own story, because then usually you're more credible.
So just before I hand to Julian, one of the things that we've done in the policy papers that we've been publishing with the collaboration of the BioAdvantage Europe group is to try and bring in those proof points, bring in those stories, not just from participants within BioAdvantage Europe, by the way, but where we see great stories from beyond, which tell the story of the potential of the bioeconomy. We've been very proud to tell those stories too. And next week's publication of our paper on the role of the bioeconomy and job creation and innovation will be one such instance. So Julian, from an erstwhile policymaker's perspective, how can the business community tell these stories better and communicate more clearly?
Well, I think from policy makers' point of view and high-level policy makers' point of view, mainly, the story has to be simple. That's very important. And it has to be appealing, simple and appealing to voters and to business, and also inspiring. I mean, these are the three things that you have to somehow juggle. And it should be a story that the policymaker should be able to tell further, because at the end of the day, what politicians do, they listen, they pick something that they can impress their voters with. So we have to look for a story that politicians will manage to impress their voters with. And I think there are a lot of stories here, because and very good stories, because it is about agriculture, it is about livelihood, it is about environment, and it is about growth, and it is about sustainability and good quality of life. And we have to look at the good quality of life. That is very, very important, especially when we talk about the East, where vast agricultural regions are depopulated simply because of sort of relatively primitive agriculture with very low income. And we're talking here about innovation, we're talking about high quality and high value added jobs. And that could be very, very appealing, and it can even reverse the democratic crisis in the countries that suffer very badly of it.
Yeah, and play to the just transition as well. So simple, compelling, inspiring. I think that's three words that I'd quite like to get very close to finishing on. The questions are still flooding in, and I'm very sorry, because some of these questions are extremely good. I'm sorry, particularly Barna from BioEast, that we won't have an opportunity to at least now ask this question. But what we will do is aggregate these questions and share them with the panelists later. Just before I hand to OleOZE to close, rather than try and rush in another question with only 2 minutes to spare, as I said a little earlier, please look out for, and we will distribute the next policy paper from the BioAdvantage Europe group on jobs and innovation, job creation and innovation. And we will get that out, I think, on the 16th, if not the 15th of December. So do keep an eye open for that, and the social media that will cover that as well. My sincere thanks to all of our speakers, and to Diederik, who of course had to drop off. It's a very, very busy week, as we all know, for the Commission. My thanks to Svein Tore and Henrik for leading at the beginning, and for Henrik for chairing us and hosting our conversation. Also, I'm going to give you the very last word, if I may.
Thank you very much, Philip, and also my thanks to all the speakers this morning for your inspiring and thoughtful insights. We are indeed living in challenging times, but one of the key takeaways I heard today, and which I'm very excited about, is that we really do have the opportunity now to move towards a new growth paradigm, all supported by the ambitious and coherent Green Deal agenda spelled out by the European Union, as we heard from Diederik Samson's the beginning of this morning. The bioeconomy, as we've heard today, is a source of great innovation and the possibility to switch to a low carbon, local and inclusive economy. And we heard some excellent examples today of innovations across the bioeconomy, from Yara and Avril's groundbreaking work to incentivize farmers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to Neste's sustainable solutions for transportation, polymers and chemicals, and KALUNBORG's industrial cluster model, very inspiring. And of course, we have the here and now solutions at Scania in collaboration with our customers on implementing solutions to decarbonize heavy road transport in the most sustainable way, such as biofuels. We heard from Julian how the bioeconomy can contribute to offsetting the negative and social impacts of the energy transition, where coal regions in transition have the potential to create low carbon innovation clusters and provide high value jobs in both agriculture and industry. A key word for the bioeconomy is sustainability, both in terms of CO2 emissions, biodiversity, and social responsibility. And it's clear that we have to measure and analyze the full set of economic and environmental impacts and benefits of bio-based solutions to better inform decision-making, although we shouldn't make a good solution the enemy until it's great, as we've also been discussing here today. But to achieve this, the bioeconomy should have a central position in the EU's recovery plans to realize its full potential to support new green jobs and future fit growth in Europe. To succeed, we need to work together, as we've been discussing here this morning, which is exactly what we do in BioAdvantage Europe, aiming to create this one voice and tell this common story that is so important to reach this understanding from policy and other parts of society. We need to encourage opportunities for practical dialogue and knowledge exchange between policymakers, business, universities, and other stakeholders to ensure appropriate initiatives and projects are developed and scaled in the right places, or to put it simple, we need to unleash this power of collaboration, as put by Peter Vanacker, and create the unexpected alliances like Henrik Henriksson suggested. And this is very much what BioAdvantage Europe will be focusing on in our action plan for 2021, where we will seek to incubate and demonstrate projects based on these principles, as well as promote knowledge exchange and targeted engagements between policymakers and the business involved in this initiative. We will, of course, keep you posted on our progress, and we very much welcome your active involvement. Please contact us, ask questions on what was discussed today, or suggest other things that we should look at in BioAdvantage Europe. And we hope you enjoyed the roundtable here today, and please stay in touch. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.